The paper was pink. Neon, offensive. "I want to speak to your manager," pink. It was fluttering under the windshield wiper of my 2018 Honda Accord, trapped against the glass like a frantic butterfly. I stood there in my bathrobe, holding a mug of coffee that was rapidly losing its heat in the humid, oppressive air of a Florida Tuesday morning. I plucked the slip from the wiper. It was heavy cardstock. High quality. The Gilded Oaks Homeowners Association didn't skimp on their stationery, even if they refused to fix the potholes on Elm Street. "Violation notice," it screamed in bold sans serif font. Category: unauthorized driveway obstruction. Fine, $500. I blinked. I looked at my car. It was parked perfectly centered in my own driveway. I looked back at the ticket. I looked at the driveway again. It was concrete. It was clean. There were no oil stains, no flat tires, no dead bodies in the trunk that they knew about. It was just a car, sitting in a place designed for cars, doing exactly what a car is supposed to do when it isn't moving. My name is Jack. I'm a mechanical engineer, which means two things. I solve problems for a living, and I have a very low tolerance for illogical stupidity. I also possess a dangerous amount of patience when I feel I've been wronged. And looking at that pink slip, feeling the sweat start to prickle on my neck, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a fine. This was a declaration of war. To understand why I eventually bought a rusted shell of a 1978 Chevy Nova and mounted it on jack stands like a monument to pettiness, you have to understand the Gilded Oaks. It was one of those master-planned communities that sprouted out of the swamp in the early 2000s, promising resort-style living, but delivering Orwellian surveillance state. The grass had to be St. Augustine sod, cut to exactly 3 inches. The mailboxes all had to be painted Revere pewter. If you left your garbage bin out past 6 p.m. on collection day, you'd get a nastygram before the sun went down. And the tyrant sitting on the iron throne of this beige kingdom was Patricia. Patricia was the HOA president. She was a woman who had clearly never heard the word no in her life. Or if she had, she assumed it was a suggestion she could override with a bylaws amendment. She drove around the neighborhood in a custom golf cart with a canvas roof and a clipboard mounted to the steering wheel, looking for infractions like a shark looks for blood in the water. I walked inside, ticket in hand, and slapped it on the granite countertop. My wife, Sarah, didn't even look up from her iPad. "Patricia?" she asked. "Patricia," I confirmed. $500 for parking in the driveway." Sarah sighed, the long, suffering sigh of a woman who knew her husband was about to become obsessive. "Jack, just pay it, or park in the garage." "I can't park in the garage, Sarah. You know this. Your SUV takes up the left side and the right side is the shop." The shop was my sanctuary. It was where I kept my table saw, my drill press, my welding rig, and about $10,000 worth of tools that I used to build furniture and fix things around the house. It was organized, it was functional, and it was absolutely full. There was no room for a Honda Accord unless I wanted to park it on top of my bandsaw. "Well," Sarah said, taking a sip of her tea, "looks like you're going to the meeting tonight." I went to the meeting. I went to the meeting. The Gilded Oaks Community Center smelled like floor wax and aggressive potpourri. There were about 50 folding chairs set up, but only 12 people were there. 5 of them were the board members, sitting at a long table on a raised platform, looking down on us like the gods of Olympus, if Olympus was furnished by IKEA. Patricia sat in the center. She had hair that defied gravity, sprayed into a helmet of blonde ambition. She tapped a tiny wooden gavel on the table. "Next item on the agenda," she chirped, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "The new vehicle storage aesthetic guidelines." I stood up. My knees popped. I was 34, but my knees sounded 60. I'd like to speak on that. Patricia peered over her rimless glasses. Name and address? Jack Miller, 402 Oak View Lane. Ah, Mr. Miller, she smiled. It was the smile of a crocodile who had just spotted a particularly juicy gazelle. We issued you a citation this morning. I assume you're here to pay? I'm here to appeal, I said, walking to the front. I was fined for parking in my driveway. It's a driveway, Patricia. The word a drive is in the name. It's where cars go. Actually, she said, pulling a thick binder toward her. As of the emergency vote taken last Tuesday, the board has determined that visible vehicles are a detriment to the neighborhood's resort aesthetic. We are aiming for a cleaner, more unblemished look. Therefore, all vehicles must be garaged overnight, no exceptions. I looked around the room. The other residents were staring at their shoes. They were beaten dogs. Patricia, I said, keeping my voice level, engaging my professional engineer tone. I have a 2-car garage. My wife parks in one spot. My workshop is in the other. I physically cannot put my car in the garage. That sounds like a personal inventory management issue, not an HOA issue, she said smoothly. The guy sitting next to her, a toad-faced man named Greg, who served as the treasurer, snickered. So, what am I supposed to do? I asked. Park on the street? Absolutely not, Patricia gasped, clutching her pearls. Literally, she was wearing pearls. Street parking creates congestion and blocks emergency vehicles. That's an immediate towing enforcement. So I can't park in the driveway. I can't park on the street. And I can't fit in the garage. I spread my hands. Do you want me to hover the car? Should I invest in anti-gravity technology? We suggest off-site storage, Patricia said, bored now. There's a lovely lot 3 miles down the highway. You can park there and walk home. Walk home? I felt a vein in my forehead start to throb. 3 miles? In July? In Florida? It would be good exercise, Greg offered. Motion to deny the appeal, Patricia said. Seconded, Greg said. All in favor? 5 hands went up. Appeal denied. The fine stands. And Mr. Miller, if the vehicle is there tomorrow night, the fine doubles. If it's there the night after that, we tow it. Next item. I walked out of that meeting with a ringing in my ears. It wasn't tinnitus. It was rage. Pure, unadulterated, white-hot rage. I paid the $500. I wrote the check with such force I nearly tore through the paper, but I didn't move the car. I couldn't move the car. It was 9 p.m. I wasn't driving 3 miles to a storage lot and walking back in the dark. I parked it in the driveway, locked the doors, and went to bed, hoping they were bluffing. They were not bluffing. At 2:14 a.m., I woke up to the sound of a diesel engine idling outside my window. I scrambled out of bed, tripping over the dog, and ran to the window just in time to see the back end of my Honda being hoisted into the air by a tow truck with Predator Towing stenciled on the side. "Hey!" I screamed, banging on the glass. "Hey!" The driver didn't hear me. Or he didn't care. He locked the winch, hopped in the cab, and dragged my car away into the night like a thief. I stood there in the dark, watching my taillights disappear. My wife shifted in bed behind me. "Did they take it?" she mumbled. "Yeah," I whispered. "They took it." "I told you to clear out the shop." "I'm not clearing out the shop, Sarah. I'm not letting them win." The next morning was a humiliation conga line. I had to Uber to the tow yard, which was located in a part of town that consisted entirely of barbed wire fences and angry pit bulls. I had to pay $350 in cash to a guy who looked like he ate gravel for breakfast to get my car back. Then I had to drive home, knowing I couldn't park there. I spent the next 3 days playing a shell game. I parked at the grocery store a mile away and jogged home. I parked at a friend's house in the next neighborhood over. I felt like a fugitive in my own life. I was an engineer with a master's degree, hiding my Honda Accord like it was contraband plutonium. On Friday night, I hit my breaking point. I was sitting in my home office, surrounded by stacks of paper. I had downloaded the entire CC&Rs, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions of the Gilded Oaks. It was a 300-page document written in legalese so dense it could stop a bullet. Most people don't read the CC&Rs. They sign the paper at closing, hand over their soul, and hope for the best. But I read everything. It's what I do. I look for stress fractures in metal, and I look for loopholes in logic. I had a pot of coffee, a highlighter, and a playlist of angry heavy metal playing softly in the background. I read through the architectural guidelines. I read through the landscaping mandates. I read through the pet restrictions. No exotic cats, sadly. And then, at 3:42 a.m., somewhere between waste management protocols and holiday decoration limitations, I found it. It was buried in a subsection that hadn't been updated since the neighborhood was founded, probably cut and pasted from some generic template the developers used in the 90s. Article 9, Section C, Vehicle Maintenance and Repair. While the storage of inoperable or unsightly vehicles is prohibited, the association recognizes the right of homeowners to perform necessary maintenance on their personal property. Therefore, vehicles undergoing active mechanical restoration, emergency repair, or safety inspections are exempt from parking restrictions for the duration of the maintenance period, provided such work is performed in a safe manner. I stopped. I read it again. Exempt from parking restrictions. Duration of the maintenance period. There was no time limit defined. There was no definition of what active restoration entailed. There was no clause stating the vehicle had to be the one you drove to work. A slow, terrifying grin spread across my face. I didn't just smile. I bared my teeth. I didn't want to park my Honda in the driveway anymore. That was thinking too small. If they wanted to control what was in my driveway, I was going to give them something to look at. I grabbed my phone. It was 4 a.m., but the internet never sleeps. I opened Craigslist. I set the filter to price low to high and typed in project car. I didn't want something that ran. I didn't want something nice. I wanted a carcass. I scrolled past the rusted tractors and the scams. And then I saw her. She was hideous. A 1978 Chevy Nova. Not the cool muscle car Nova from the late 60s. The sad Malaise-era Nova that looked like a brick of tofu that had given up on life. It was painted a color that could only be described as baby vomit green, peeling away to reveal patches of surface rust that looked like leprosy. It had no engine. It had no transmission. The interior was missing. The glass was cracked. The ad read, "Roller only, no title, $500, get it off my lawn." It was perfect. It was the ugliest thing I had ever seen. I texted the guy immediately. "I'll take it. Can you deliver it this morning?" He replied 2 minutes later. "For an extra $50, I'll drag it anywhere you want." By noon on Saturday, the tow truck arrived. This wasn't the slick, Predator towing truck. This was a flatbed that looked like it had survived a war zone. The driver, a guy named Skeeter who had more grease on his shirt than fabric, tilted the bed. Gravity did the rest. The Nova slid off the back with a screech of metal on concrete that sounded like a dying pterodactyl. It slammed onto my driveway, slightly crooked, taking up the exact center of the slab. Skeeter looked at me, spitting a wad of tobacco onto my pristine lawn. "What you gonna do with that hunk of junk, brother?" "I'm going to restore it," I said, handing him the cash. Slowly. I went into my garage and brought out the heavy artillery. 4 6-ton jack stands. I used my floor jack to lift the Nova up, one corner at a time. I placed the stands underneath the frame rails, setting them to the highest possible setting. The car sat there, elevated 2 feet off the ground, hovering like a rusted spacecraft. Then, I took the wheels off. I rolled the tires into the garage and closed the door. The Nova sat there on the stands. It looked like a skeleton picked clean by vultures. It was an eyesore of biblical proportions. It clashed violently with the beige stucco of my house. It blocked the view of the manicured hydrangeas. It was absolutely glorious. I went inside, made a sandwich, and waited. It didn't take long. I saw the golf cart first. The whine of the electric motor was the soundtrack of my impending victory. Patricia rounded the corner, her head swiveling like a tank turret. She saw the Nova. She slammed on the brakes so hard the golf cart actually skidded. She stared. She blinked. She took off her glasses, cleaned them, and put them back on. The Nova was still there. She marched up my walkway, her heels clicking on the pavers like gunshots. She didn't ring the doorbell. She pounded on the door. I opened it, holding a wrench I wasn't using. "Afternoon, Patricia. Lovely day for a drive?" Her face was a shade of purple I'd never seen in nature. "What is that?" She pointed a trembling finger at the Nova. That's my project. 1978 Chevy Nova. Classic American muscle. Well, muscle adjacent. "Get it out of here," she hissed. "Get it out of here right now. That is an abomination. That is a violation of Article 4, Section B regarding aesthetic harmony. That is a violation of the parking rule. I will fine you $1,000 a day until that heap is incinerated." "Actually," I said, pulling a folded piece of paper from my back pocket. I had highlighted the relevant text in neon yellow. "If you'll refer to the CC and Rs, Article 9, Section C clearly states that vehicles undergoing active mechanical restoration are exempt from parking restrictions." Patricia snatched the paper from my hand. Her eyes scanned the text. Her lips moved silently as she read. She looked up at me, then at the car, then back at the paper. This refers to repairs," she sputtered. "Like changing a tire, not running a junkyard in the front of your house." "It says restoration, Patricia. And that's what I'm doing. I'm restoring it. Frame off, ground up. It's going to take a while. Parts are hard to find for these beauties." "I don't care what it says," she shrieked. "It's unsightly, it's broken, it has no wheels." "Because I'm working on the brakes," I lied. There were no brakes. Can't fix the brakes with the wheels on, can I? "I'm calling the police," she said, pulling out her phone. "There are city ordinances against abandoned vehicles." "Go ahead," I smiled. "I'll make some iced tea." Officer Miller, no relation, arrived 20 minutes later. He was a young guy, looked tired. He walked up the driveway, looked at the Nova on jack stands, looked at Patricia, who was practically vibrating with rage, and then looked at me. "Sir," Officer Miller said, "is this your vehicle?" "Yes, officer, I have the bill of sale right here." I handed him the scribbled receipt from the Craigslist guy. "The neighbor says it's abandoned." "Not abandoned. Undergoing restoration. See the jack stands? I'm working on the suspension." I tapped the rusted fender with my wrench. A flake of rust drifted down like snow. "It has no engine," Patricia shouted. "Look under the hood, it's empty." "I'm sourcing a period-correct V8, I said calmly. "You can't rush art, officer." Officer Miller looked at the CC and Rs I offered him. He read the highlighted section. He looked at the car again. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. He looked at Patricia. "Ma'am, this appears to be a civil matter. The vehicle is on private property, it's secure on stands, and according to your own bylaws here, he's allowed to fix it." "But look at it," Patricia wailed. "It's a work in progress," the officer said. "Have a nice day, folks." He tipped his cap and walked away. Patricia stood there for a moment, staring at me with the cold, dead eyes of a shark that had just swum into a glass wall. "This isn't over, Jack," she whispered. "I know," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "Restorations take a long time, Patricia, a long, long time." She stomped back to her golf cart and peeled away. I watched her go, then looked at the Nova. It was ugly. It was trash. But in that moment, gleaming under the Florida sun, it was the most beautiful thing I had ever owned. The war had begun, and I had just dug my trench. The week following the Great Nova Incident, as it came to be known in the annals of the Gilded Oaks, was a masterclass in bureaucratic trench warfare. Patricia didn't just give up. People like Patricia don't give up. They just reload. She was the kind of person who would sue the sun for rising too early on a Sunday. On Monday morning, I walked out to retrieve the newspaper. Yes, I still subscribe to a physical newspaper, mostly because I enjoy doing the crossword puzzle with a pen to assert dominance over uncertainty, and found a new note taped to the rusted fender of the Nova. Notice of violation hearing regarding Article 9, Section C interpretation. They were moving fast, but I was moving faster. I knew the weakness of my position. The loophole said active restoration. That word active was doing a lot of heavy lifting. If the car just sat there gathering dust, they could argue it was storage, not restoration. To beat them, I needed a paper trail so thick it could choke a hippopotamus. I went inside, fired up my laptop, and opened Rock Auto, Amazon, and eBay Motors. I didn't order the engine. I didn't order the transmission. I didn't order the body panels. I ordered a single-valve stem cap. I ordered one fuzzy die, singular, for the mirror. I ordered a specific type of bolt used to secure the glove box latch. I ordered a sticker that said gas, grass, or ass. Nobody rides for free. I placed 25 separate orders. I paid for individual shipping on all of them. I wanted 25 separate boxes arriving at my house over the next month. Every single tracking number was a bullet in my gun. The first box arrived on Wednesday. It was huge. Amazon had packed the single glove box bolt in a box big enough to hold a microwave, filled with those air pillows. I made sure to open it on the front porch while Patricia was doing her patrols. She slowed the golf cart down as she saw me slicing the tape with a box cutter. "Morning, Patricia," I yelled, waving the box cutter in a friendly, non-threatening manner. "Parts are coming in. The restoration is in full swing." She stopped the cart. The motor whined down into silence. "That's a big box, Jack. Engine block?" "Vital structural component," I said. I reached in, rummaged through the plastic bubbles, and pulled out the bolt. It was the size of a jelly bean. I held it up to the sun like Simba on Pride Rock. The glove box latch retention bolt. Can't be safe on the road without a secure glove box, Patricia. Safety first. Her knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. "You're mocking the association." "I'm complying with the bylaws," I corrected. "Active restoration. This bolt represents progress. I'm going to install it right now." I walked over to the Nova, opened the passenger door, which creaked so loudly a flock of birds took flight from a nearby tree, and pretended to screw the bolt into the empty void where a dashboard used to be. "There," I said, wiping imaginary sweat from my brow. "Hard work. I'm taking a break." "You have a hearing on Thursday," she spat. "We're going to define active so tightly you won't be able to breathe without a permit." Looking forward to it. The hearing was less of a legal proceeding and more of a kangaroo court held in a rec center. But I came prepared. I brought a Gantt chart. For those who don't work in project management or engineering, a Gantt chart is a bar chart that illustrates a project schedule. I had printed mine out on A1 plotter paper. It was 4 feet long. I taped it to the wall behind the board members. As you can see, I told the board, using a laser pointer, we are currently in Phase 1, procurement and micro-assessment. This phase involves cataloging every missing screw and sourcing vintage-correct replacements. Given the scarcity of 1978 Chevy Nova parts, a vehicle known for its rarity due to most of them rusting into oblivion by 1985, this phase is projected to last approximately 18 months. Greg, the toad-faced treasurer, squinted at the chart. Mr. Miller, this timeline says chassis sanding isn't scheduled to begin until 2027. Correct, I said. You can't rush surface preparation. It requires the right humidity levels. I'm waiting for a dry season, maybe a drought. This is ridiculous, Patricia seethed. You are clearly abusing the spirit of the law. I follow the letter of the law, Patricia. The spirit is open to interpretation. The letter is black and white. Am I actively restoring it? Yes. Here are the receipts for the parts I bought this week. I slammed a stack of invoices onto the table. 1 washer, 1 bolt, 1 sticker. Total cost, $14.50. Shipping cost, $45. Motion to fine Mr. Miller for, Patricia stammered, looking for something, anything. For following the rules? I asked. The board's lawyer, a guy named Steve who looked like he'd rather be doing literally anything else, leaned over and whispered in Patricia's ear. I heard the words technically compliant and litigation risk. Patricia deflated. Fine. We can't stop the restoration, but we can regulate the appearance of the worksite. She smiled then. It was a nasty, triumphant smile. New bylaw passed effective immediately, she announced. All outdoor maintenance projects must be screened from public view to preserve the visual integrity of the street. If that car is visible from the road tomorrow morning, it's a $100 fine. Per hour. I froze. They had me. I couldn't build a fence in the front yard. That was strictly prohibited. I couldn't build a garage extension. They'd deny the permit. If I couldn't see the car, I couldn't work on the car. But if I could see it, they could fine me. Meeting adjourned, Patricia said, slamming the gavel. I walked home, feeling the weight of defeat. I stood in my driveway looking at the Nova. It was ugly, yes. But it was my ugly. I needed a cover. But not just a car cover. A car cover implies a stored vehicle. I needed a workspace and I needed a contractor. I didn't call the polished, professional contractors with wrapped vans and clipboards. I called Big Mike. I knew Big Mike from a job site a few years back. He was a general contractor who specialized in difficult situations. He was 6'5", shaped like a vending machine, and had a beard that could hide a family of badgers. He drove a Ford F-350 that sounded like the apocalypse and had a bumper sticker that said, "My other ride is your mom." He pulled up to my house at 7 a.m. the next morning. The rumble of his truck set off 3 car alarms on the street. He stepped out, crushed an empty Red Bull can against his forehead, and looked at the Nova. "She's a beauty," Mike said, his voice sounding like gravel in a blender. "What's the plan, boss?" "They say I have to cover it," I said. "But I can't build a permanent structure. I need something. Temporary, but robust and legal." Mike scratched his beard. "So, malicious compliance?" "Malicious compliance. My favorite flavor." He walked around the car. "We can't do wood framing. That requires a permit. We can't do masonry, but have you read the bylaws on temporary event shelters?" "I have," I said. "Temporary pop-up canopies or tents are permitted for social events or emergency maintenance for a period not exceeding 72 hours. Mike grinned. It was a terrifying sight. 72 hours, huh? That's 3 days. Exactly. So I put it up, work for 3 days, take it down? Nah, Mike said. That's too much work for you. We build a temporary structure that is technically a tent. We bolt it down so it doesn't fly away. but we use wing nuts, so it's removable. Then, every 3 days, you undo one wing nut, lift a leg an inch, set it back down, and tighten it. Boom. The clock resets. You moved the structure. Mike, I said, you're a genius. I know, that's why I charge double for HOA jobs. We went to the hardware store. We didn't buy a nice beige gazebo that would blend in. We went to the industrial aisle. We bought bright blue heavy-duty tarping. We bought scaffolding poles. We bought neon orange ratchet straps. By noon, the structure was up. It looked like a FEMA camp had been set up on my driveway. It was a monstrosity of blue plastic and galvanized steel, towering 10 feet in the air, secured by orange straps that crisscrossed the driveway like laser beams in a spy movie. It was hideous. It was perfect. I was sitting in a lawn chair under the blue canopy, drinking a beer and staring at the Nova's rusted quarter panel when Patricia arrived. She didn't even park the golf cart. She just drove it up onto the grass, a violation of Article 6, but I let it slide for the moment, and screamed, "What is this circus tent?" "It's a temporary maintenance shelter," I said, cracking open a second beer. "Article 12, Section D, required to shield the work from public view, per your request last night. You said you didn't want to see the car. Can you see the car?" "I can see this blue nightmare from space," she shrieked. "But you can't see the car," I pointed out. "I'm compliant. It's illegal. No structures in the front setback." "It's not a structure," I said. "It's a tent. See the poles? Not cemented, temporary." "You have 72 hours, she yelled. 72 hours, Jack. On Monday morning, if this tent is here, I am calling the city, I am calling the county, I am calling the National Guard." "Understood," I said, saluting her with the beer can. The weekend passed. The blue monstrosity flapped in the wind, making a sound like a whip crack every time a breeze blew. It was loud. It was annoying. I loved it. Monday morning, 6 a.m. Patricia was there. She had Officer Miller with her again. She looked smug. 72 hours are up, she announced. "Officer, write the citation." I walked out of the house. I was wearing my working coveralls. "Good morning," I said. "You're right. 72 hours are up." I walked over to the front left leg of the scaffold structure. I undid the wing nut. I lifted the pole 2 inches off the ground. I kicked a small rock under it. I put the pole down. I tightened the wing nut. Then I walked to the back right leg, did the same thing. I looked at Officer Miller. "I have just disassembled and reassembled the configuration of the shelter. It is now in a new position. The 72-hour clock resets now." Patricia looked at Officer Miller. "Arrest him." Miller rubbed his temples. "Ma'am, did he move the tent?" "He moved it an inch." "So, he moved it." Miller sighed. "Mr. Miller, please try to keep the noise down. Patricia, stop calling me unless someone is bleeding." As Miller walked away, I saw something change in the neighborhood. Across the street, my neighbor, Dave, was washing his car. Dave was a quiet guy, played by the rules. Never made waves. Dave stopped washing his car. He looked at me. He looked at the blue monstrosity. He looked at Patricia, who was currently hyperventilating in her golf cart. Dave gave me a thumbs up. It started small. That evening, Dave came over. He brought a 6-pack of IPA. "Hey," he said, standing at the edge of the blue tarp. "Nice. Restoration." "Thanks, Dave. It's a lot of work. Surface rust is a killer." "Mind if I supervise?" he asked. "Consultants are always welcome," I said, handing him a sanding block. By the end of the week, the driveway wasn't just a construction zone. It was a destination. Men in the neighborhood, tired of being told their grass was a 1/4 inch too long, tired of hiding their trash cans like shameful secrets, started drifting toward the blue tent. It became a sanctuary, a place where men could stand around a rusted heap of metal, drink beer, and complain about their wives and the HOA. We weren't actually doing anything to the car. We were mostly just sanding the same fender, over and over again. That front left fender was the smoothest piece of metal in the continental United States. We sanded it down to the bare metal, then we primed it, then we sanded the primer, then we primed it again. It was zen. It was meditation. One Saturday, Big Mike stopped by to check on the structure. He saw 4 of us standing around the Nova, drinking Miller Lite. "Yo," Mike said, "you guys need a fridge." "Can't," I said. "Outdoor appliances are banned." "Not if it's a chemical storage unit for the restoration," Mike said. The next day, a mini fridge appeared. I slapped a sticker on it that said, "Adhesive Curing Chamber." We filled it with beer. Patricia tried to fight us on the noise. She claimed the sanding was violating the decibel limits. So I bought a decibel meter. I mounted it on the tent pole. Whenever we sanded, we made sure to stay exactly 1 decibel below the limit. The rhythmic swish, swish, swish of sandpaper became the heartbeat of the street. But the real turning point came when the contractors started showing up for other people. See, the HOA had a list of approved vendors. These were contractors who kicked back a percentage to the management company. They were expensive and slow. Big Mike, however, was now a legend. He had built the indestructible blue tent. People started asking him for quotes. "Hey, Mike, can you fix my fence?" "Sure," Mike would say, "but the HOA won't approve the permit." "What if we call it a security partition restoration?" I'd suggest from under the tent. We started weaponizing the language of the bylaws. Dave wanted a shed. The HOA said no sheds. I looked at the rules. No permanent detached structures. I looked at Dave. Put it on wheels. What? Put the shed on heavy-duty casters. It's not a structure, it's a trailer. Dave built an 8x10 shed on wheels. Every time Patricia complained, he rolled it 3 feet to the left. The neighborhood was waking up. The fear was gone. The Gilded Oaks was becoming the Gilded Rebellion, and in the center of it all, like a rusted altar to the gods of chaos, sat the Nova. Patricia was losing control, and she knew it. She needed a win. She needed to crush me, the ringleader. It was about 6 months in when she played her next card. I came home from work to find a contractor truck in my driveway, not Big Mike's. A guy in a polo shirt was measuring the opacity of my blue tarp with a light meter. "Can I help you?" I asked, stepping out of my car. "HOA audit," the guy said. "Checking for light pollution and aesthetic compliance of temporary structures." 2 days later, I got the letter. The Architectural Review Committee has determined that industrial blue is not a sanctioned color within the Gilded Oaks. All structures must be earth tone. You have 48 hours to replace the tarp or face fines of $250 per day. I read the letter. I smiled. "Earth tone," I whispered. I called Big Mike. "Mike, what's the ugliest earth tone you can find?" "Baby crap brown," Mike suggested. "No," I said. "I want swamp sludge. I want decomposing algae." "I got a guy who does custom canvas," Mike said. "We can get you a tarp that looks like a giant pile of wet dirt." "Do it!" We replaced the blue tarp with a brown one. But I didn't stop there. If they wanted earth tones, I would give them earth. I went to the garden center. I bought climbing vines, fast-growing ones, kudzu-level aggressive. I planted them in pots at the base of the jack stands. I trained them up the scaffolding poles. Within 2 months, the tent wasn't just a tent. It was a chia pet. It was a living, breathing green monster. Patricia drove by. She stopped. She stared at the vines consuming the structure. "Is that vegetation?" she asked. "It's camouflage," I said, "to blend in with the natural surroundings, per the eco-friendly initiative you passed in 2018. I'm reducing the carbon footprint of the restoration." She opened her mouth to scream, but closed it. She looked tired. She looked older. "I hate you, Jack," she said quietly. "I know, Patricia," I said, "but look on the bright side. The property values are stable." "Just finish the car," she pleaded. "Just finish it and make this stop." "I'm trying," I lied, "but I think I found some rust on the undercarriage. Might need to take the body off the frame." She drove away. Her shoulders slumped. I thought I had won. I thought she was broken. But I underestimated the power of a bureaucrat with nothing left to lose. Patricia retired that winter. We threw a party, not for her, but because of her. We roasted a pig in the driveway under the vine tent. But her replacement, his name was Chad. He was 28. He wore suits on Saturdays. He had an MBA. And he didn't care about rules. He cared about results. Chad didn't want to fine me. Chad wanted to evict me. And unlike Patricia, Chad was smart. He didn't attack the car. He attacked the ground it stood on. One morning, a certified letter arrived. It wasn't about the Nova. It wasn't about the tent. Notice of line foreclosure proceedings. Reason, violation of hazardous materials clause. Soil contamination suspected due to long-term vehicle disassembly. They were claiming my Nova was leaking toxic fluids into the water table. They wanted to seize the house to pay for the environmental cleanup. I looked at the Nova. It didn't have an engine. It didn't have a transmission. It didn't have fluids. It was a bone-dry husk. But to prove that, I'd have to let them inspect it. And if they inspected it, they'd see I hadn't done a damn thing in 3 years except sand one fender. They'd prove it wasn't active restoration. They'd prove fraud. I was trapped. I looked at the Nova. I looked at the letter. "Mike," I said into the phone, "we have a problem. I need an engine, and I need it by Tuesday." "Does it need to run?" Mike asked. "No," I said. "It just needs to look like it's leaking." "Wait," Mike said. "You want it to leak?" "No," I said, my brain spinning. "I need to prove it's capable of leaking, but not leaking. I need an engine block, and I need paint, neon pink paint." "Jack, have you lost your mind?" "No, Mike, I'm just shifting gears." It was time for the engine incident. The engine incident was, in hindsight, my masterpiece. It was the moment I stopped playing defense and started playing 4D chess with a rulebook written by people who thought beige was an emotion. Chad wanted to pin me on environmental hazards. He wanted to claim my beloved Nova, a car that hadn't seen a drop of fluid since the Reagan administration, was leaking toxic sludge into the pristine groundwater of the Gilded Oaks. If I showed him an empty engine bay, he'd claim I was stripping the car, which violated the active restoration clause. You can't restore a car by removing parts and never replacing them. If I showed him a real greasy engine, he'd claim it was a biohazard. I needed a third option. I needed Schrodinger's engine. Big Mike came through. He found a 350 small block Chevy V8 in a scrapyard 3 counties over. It was seized solid. A piston had actually welded itself to the cylinder wall. It was, mechanically speaking, a boat anchor. "Clean it," I told Mike. "I want it so clean you could perform open-heart surgery on it." We spent a weekend with a pressure washer, 5 gallons of industrial degreaser, and wire brushes. We stripped that block down to bare, gleaming iron. There wasn't a molecule of oil left on it. Then we painted it. I didn't choose Chevy orange. I didn't choose black. I went to the paint shop and asked for neon Pepto-Bismol. It was a pink so bright it vibrated. It was the color of a flamingo having a panic attack. "Why pink?" Mike asked, spraying the valve covers. "Because," I said, adjusting my respirator mask, It's hard to ignore, and it annoys Chad, mostly because it annoys Chad. We lowered it into the Nova on a Tuesday night, under the cover of the vine-encrusted eco-tent. We bolted it in. It had no spark plugs, it had no carburetor, it had no hoses. Just a bright pink block sitting in a matte black bay. Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. The inspection. Chad rolled up in a black BMW. Of course he drove a black BMW. He didn't park on the grass like Patricia. He parked exactly 6 inches from the curb, perfectly legal. He got out, adjusting his suit jacket. He had brought a specialist, a guy in a jumpsuit holding a soil testing kit and a clipboard. "Mr. Miller," Chad said. He didn't yell. He was smooth, corporate. "We're here for the environmental assessment. If we find 1 drop of hydrocarbons in the soil, we're filing for an emergency injunction to seize the property for remediation." "Morning, Chad," I said, sipping my coffee. "Morning, specialist. By all means, inspect away." I led them under the canopy. The air inside was green and cool, thanks to the thick layer of kudzu and ivy that had now completely consumed the scaffolding. It felt like walking into a Mayan ruin, if the Mayans worshipped shitty 70s sedans. Chad stopped. He stared at the engine bay. The hood was off. The pink engine screamed at him in the dappled light. "It's pink," Chad said. His voice wavered just for a second. "It's thermal safety magenta," I lied effortlessly. "High visibility coating. Allows for easier detection of microfractures during the stress testing phase." "Stress testing?" the specialist asked, stepping forward. "Does it run?" "God, no," I said. "We're not at the combustion phase. We're at the structural integrity fitment phase." The specialist leaned in. He sniffed. He frowned. "It smells like strawberries?" "That's the biodegradable cleaning agent," I said. "I scrubbed the entire chassis with organic, non-toxic, citrus-based solvents. You could lick that oil pan, Chad. Go ahead, lick it." Chad did not lick the oil pan. "Check for leaks," Chad ordered the specialist. The guy crawled under the car. He poked around for 10 minutes. He came out looking disappointed. "It's dry as a bone, sir. Cleaner than my operating table. There's no oil, no gas, no brake fluid. There's nothing to leak." Chad's jaw tightened. He looked at the pink engine. He looked at me. "It's not an active restoration if it's just a block of iron sitting there, Jack. It's a statue." "Au contraire," I said. I reached into the engine bay and placed a single chrome bolt into a hole on the intake manifold. I gave it 1 full turn with a wrench. Click. "I just installed the intake manifold retention fastener. That is active mechanical labor, documented at 9:12 a.m. I pulled out my notebook and wrote it down. Chad looked like he wanted to punch me, but he couldn't. He was corporate. He had to be professional. "You're playing a dangerous game," Chad said softly. "The board is losing patience. We're going to find something. A code violation, a zoning issue, something." "Good luck, Chad. Hey, do you like the color? I was thinking of doing the calipers in lime green." Chad spun on his heel and marched out. The pink engine saved the house, but it also marked the beginning of the long war. The next 5 years were a blur of petty bureaucracy and guerrilla landscaping. The neighborhood changed around us. People moved out, tired of the HOA's tyranny. New people moved in, saw the vine-covered hump in my driveway with the neon pink heart, and either joined the rebellion or kept their heads down. My driveway became a demilitarized zone. I spent those years mastering the art of the stall. Year 3. The HOA tried to pass a rule banning non-factory paint colors on vehicles visible from the street. They were targeting the pink engine. I responded by filing a request for a historical variance. I created a fake Wikipedia page for a 1978 Chevrolet Nova Barbie edition prototype and cited it as my source material. I printed out doctored photos of a pink Nova on a GM assembly line. I presented it to the board. Gentlemen, this is history. To paint it black would be to erase the cultural heritage of the automotive industry. They spent 6 months verifying the claim. By the time they realized the Wikipedia page was edited by user JackStandKing78, I had already repainted the engine block safety orange. Year 5. The vines were a problem. They were getting too thick. The tent was no longer a tent. It was a hedge shaped like a garage. Chad sent a landscaper to cut it down, citing overgrown vegetation. I was ready. I had anticipated this. Florida has a specific species of lizard, the scrub lizard. It's threatened. It's protected. You can't disturb its habitat. I didn't have any scrub lizards, but I knew a guy who bred iguanas, and he knew a guy who knew a guy. I bought 3 terrariums. I bought a heater, and I discovered a nesting pair of lizards living in the wheel well of the Nova. I called the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission before I called the HOA. When Chad arrived with the hedge trimmers, he was met by a state wildlife officer named Ranger Rick. Not his real name, but he looked like a Rick. "Step away from the habitat, son," Ranger Rick said, hand on his belt. "It's a car," Chad screamed. "It's a rusted piece of junk covered in weeds." "It is a documented nesting site for a protected reptile," Ranger Rick drawled. "If you disturb one leaf on this structure, I will slap you with a federal fine so big your grandchildren will be paying it off." Chad turned to me. His face was no longer smooth. He had developed a twitch under his left eye. "You put them there," Chad hissed. "Nature finds a way," I quoted Jurassic Park, smiling beatifically. The vines stayed. The car stayed. Year 7. The Nova was barely visible anymore. It was a mound of green ivy with 4 rubber tires sticking out the bottom. I had put the wheels back on to stop the rotors from seizing, then put it back on jack stands to keep it under repair. But here's the secret. The thing nobody knew. Not Chad, not Patricia, who was now in a nursing home, probably writing citations to the orderlies. Not even Big Mike. I was restoring the car, but not in the driveway. Every night for 7 years I would go down to my basement. I had dug out a small access tunnel from the back of the garage to the basement, a project that definitely did not have a permit. But who was checking the basement? In the basement, I had a second engine, a real one. A 6.2-liter LS3V8 crate engine, putting out 430 horsepower. I had a modern transmission. I had a brand new suspension system. I had bucket seats upholstered in premium leather. I treated the driveway car as a decoy. I bought duplicate parts. I'd buy a rusty fender for the driveway car and a pristine new fender for the real car. The driveway car was the shield. The basement was the sword. I knew eventually the endgame would come. I knew Chad wouldn't stop until he nuked me. And when he did, I needed to be ready to drive out of that grave. The escalation to the climax began on a Tuesday in November of year 9. I came home to find a notice on my door. It wasn't pink, it wasn't white, it was red. Final notice of foreclosure. Grounds, permanent blight and failure to cure violation #892C, the Nova. Hearing date, December 15th. Action, seizure of property and forced auction. This was it. They weren't fining me anymore. They were taking my house. Chad had found a loophole in my loophole. He had dug up a state statute regarding derelict property affecting community market value. He had gathered affidavits from 3 real estate agents claiming my vine-covered lump was lowering home prices by 12%. They were going to judge me not on HOA rules, but on state law. I went to the garage. I walked past the decoy parts. I went down the hidden stairs to the basement. There, sitting on a pristine stand, was the heart. The LS3 engine. It was beautiful. It was ready. But the car in the driveway was a shell. The chassis was rusted. If I dropped this engine into that car, the torque alone would twist the frame into a pretzel. I had 30 days to turn a vine-covered compost heap into a street-legal, high-performance machine capable of driving off the property under its own power. If I could drive it, it wasn't derelict. It was a vehicle. And if it was a vehicle, their entire case for blight fell apart because a running car is property, not refuse. I called Big Mike. "Mike," I said, "it's time." "Time for what?" he asked, sounding groggy. "Operation Phoenix," I said. "Cancel your jobs for the month, bring the plasma cutter, bring the welder, and bring enough coffee to kill a horse." "Jack," Mike said, his voice serious, "that car is held together by vines and spite. If we try to make it run, it might explode." "Then we go out with a bang," I said. "Meet me at dawn." The next morning I did something I hadn't done in a decade. I tore down the vines. I ripped the ivy off the scaffolding. I exposed the Nova to the light of day. It looked horrific. The paint was gone. The metal was pitted. It looked like it had been raised from the Titanic. Chad drove by as I was ripping the last of the kudzu away. He slowed down. He rolled down his window. He was smiling. A genuine predatory smile. "Giving up, Jack?" he called out. "Cleaning up for the auction?" I looked at him, covered in dirt and dead leaves. "Just prepping for the final inspection, Chad. Make sure your checkbook is ready." He laughed. He actually laughed. "It's over, Jack. You have 3 weeks. You can't fix that. It's scrap metal. I've already got a buyer for the house. He's going to pave over this driveway the day you leave." He drove off. I turned to Mike, who was standing there with a torch in one hand and a beer in the other. "He thinks it's scrap," I said. "It is scrap, boss," Mike said, kicking the bumper. The bumper fell off. "We have the technology," I said, channeling the $6 million man. "We have the parts in the basement. We have the rage." "We're gonna need a montage," Mike said. "Cue the music." The next 3 weeks were a blur of sparks, swearing, and sleepless nights. We couldn't take the car to the basement, and we couldn't bring the basement equipment up without tipping off Chad. So we worked at night. We hung heavy blackout curtains around the tent structure. From the outside, it looked like a dark, silent box. Inside, it was a foundry. We cut out the rusted floor pans and welded in new steel. We reinforced the frame rails. We secretly ran new brake lines. The hardest part was the engine swap. We had to do it in one night. The pink block had to come out, and the real engine had to go in. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. We used a silent electric hoist. We lifted the pink block out. It clanged against the concrete. "Quiet!" I hissed. We dragged the LS3 up from the basement on a sled. It was heavy. It was tight. We lowered it in. It fit, barely. We connected the transmission. We connected the drive shaft. We wired the ignition. By the time the sun came up, the car looked exactly the same on the outside. It was still ugly. It was still patchy. It still looked like it had tetanus. But under the hood, it was a beast. We didn't start it. We couldn't. The noise would give it away. We had to wait for the hearing. The day of the hearing arrived. December 15th. It was held in the county courthouse this time. This wasn't a rec center meeting. This was real court. Chad was there with a team of lawyers. Patricia was there, wheeled in by an aide, looking frail but fueled by hate. The judge was a stern woman named Judge Holloway. She looked like she didn't put up with nonsense. "Mr. Miller," Judge Holloway said, looking over her glasses, "the association claims your property is a hazard, a blight, and a violation of state statutes regarding derelict vehicles. They are asking for the right to foreclose and remediate." "Your Honor," Chad's lawyer began, slick and polished, "the object in question has not moved in 10 years. It is covered in rust. It has no engine, or rather a painted dummy engine. It is effectively a planter box shaped like a car. It brings down the value of every home in the Gilded Oaks. It is not a restoration, it is a refuse pile. Chad nodded solemnly. Mr. Miller? The judge asked. Defense? I stood up. I was wearing my best suit. I looked respectable. Your Honor, I said, the association defines a derelict vehicle as one that is inoperable and incapable of self-propulsion. Is that correct? That is the state definition, the judge agreed. And they claim my project is a refuse pile because it doesn't run? Yes. Then, I said, turning to look at Chad, I would like to invite the court to a field demonstration. Objection! Chad's lawyer shouted. Waste of time. If the car starts, the judge said, cutting him off, and if it drives, then it is not derelict. And if it is not derelict, the foreclosure is invalid. I'll grant the motion. Court reconvenes at 402 Oakview Lane in 1 hour. Chad went pale. He leaned over to his lawyer. It's a dummy engine, he whispered loud enough for me to hear. I saw it. It's pink. It has no pistons. He's bluffing. I smiled at Chad. See you at the starting line, Chad. An hour later, the entire neighborhood was on my lawn. It was a spectacle. The judge was there. The bailiff was there. Chad and the board were there. Big Mike was there, holding a fire extinguisher just in case. The Nova sat in the driveway. I had taken the tent down completely. It looked pathetic in the bright sunlight. The tires were flat-spotted. The rust was vibrant. Chad crossed his arms. This is embarrassing, Jack. Just hand over the keys to the house. Step back, please, I told the crowd. I opened the door. The hinge screamed. I sat in the driver's seat. The smell of old vinyl and new leather hit me. I put the key in the ignition. Silence. The crowd held its breath. I looked at Patricia. She was watching with bated breath. I looked at Chad. He was smirking. I looked at Big Mike. He gave me a nod. I turned the key. Whir. The starter motor whined. It struggled. The car hadn't run in decades. The fuel needed to reach the injectors. Whir. It's dead, Chad shouted. Call it, Judge. Give him a minute, Judge Holloway said. I pumped the gas pedal, force of habit, even though it was fuel injected. I patted the dashboard. Come on, baby, I whispered. Do it for the loophole. Do it for freedom. Do it to wipe that smirk off Chad's face. I turned the key again. Whir. The LS3 caught. It didn't just start. It exploded to life. The sound was deafening. I hadn't put mufflers on it, straight headers. It sounded like a dragon gargling a chainsaw. The ground shook. A cloud of black smoke puffed out the back, followed by a clean, blue flame. Chad jumped back 3 feet. Patricia's eyes went wide. I revved it. Vroom! The sound echoed off the beige stucco houses of the Gilded Oaks. It was the song of my people. I shifted into reverse. The tires chirped. I backed out of the driveway. I shifted into drive. I rolled down the window. Hey, Chad! I yelled over the roar of the engine. Does this look inoperable to you? I slammed on the gas. The rear tires lit up. Smoke, white, thick, rubber smoke, filled the street. I did a burnout. A massive, screaming, illegal burnout right in front of the HOA president's BMW. I shot down the street. The ugly, rusted, magnificent Nova fishtailing slightly as the 430 horses found traction. I did a lap around the block. I waved at Dave. I waved at the mailman. I pulled back into the driveway, the engine idling with a menacing thump, thump, thump. I cut the engine. The silence that followed was heavy. I got out. I walked over to Judge Holloway. Exhibit A, I said. The vehicle functions. Judge Holloway was trying to hide a smile. She looked at Chad, who was staring at the tire marks on the asphalt, his mouth opening and closing like a goldfish. "Mr. Miller," the judge said, "case dismissed. The foreclosure is denied. The vehicle is clearly operational." She turned to Chad. "And I suggest the association reimburse Mr. Miller for his legal fees, and maybe fix the potholes while you're at it." Chad looked like he was going to vomit. I looked at the Nova. It was still ugly, but it was legal. The smoke from the burnout hung in the air for a solid 10 minutes, a fragrant cloud of victory that smelled like burnt rubber and unspent hydrocarbons. I stood there, leaning against the warm fender of the Nova, watching Chad try to explain to his lawyer why he had just lost a case that cost the association $40,000 in retainer fees. The neighbors didn't cheer. This wasn't a movie. They just stood there, smiling those quiet, terrifying little smiles that people wear when they watch a dictator trip over his own shoelaces. Dave, my neighbor with the shed on wheels, walked over. He handed me a cold beer. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with a reverence usually reserved for astronauts and people who win the lottery. "We did it," I corrected, clinking my can against his. "Now watch the implosion." The implosion didn't happen immediately. Bureaucracy dies slowly, like a beached whale. But the death blow had been struck. 2 weeks after the verdict, the bill came due. Judge Holloway hadn't just dismissed the case. She had awarded me legal fees. And because I had hired a firm that specialized in high-conflict property litigation, sharks in suits, the bill was astronomical. The Gilded Oaks Homeowners Association didn't have $50,000 in the liquid reserve. They had spent it all on landscaping focused on seasonal color rotation and suing me. So they did the only thing they could do. They issued a special assessment. Every home in the neighborhood got a bill for $1,200. That was the spark that burned the kingdom down. The emergency meeting was held the following Tuesday. It was standing room only. Usually these meetings were attended by Patricia, Chad, the toad-faced treasurer, and 3 people who just wanted free cookies. Tonight there were 200 people. They brought pitchforks. Metaphorically speaking, though I did see one guy holding a garden hoe with menacing intent. Chad tried to call the meeting to order. "Everyone, please settle down. This assessment is necessary due to the unforeseen legal costs incurred by the aggressive defense of Mr. Miller's blight." "It wasn't blight," a woman shouted from the back. "It was a hot rod, and it runs better than your BMW, Chad." "You sued him for 10 years, another guy yelled. "And you lost. Why are we paying for your ego trip?" "We were upholding the standards," Chad squeaked, his voice cracking. "I move to dissolve the current board," Dave shouted. "Second," screamed the entire room. It was a bloodbath. By 8:30 p.m., Chad, the treasurer, and the rest of the cronies were out. They were stripped of their titles, their gavels, and their golf cart keys. A new board was elected on the spot. Dave was voted in as president. His first act was to abolish the Visual Harmony Committee. His second act was to legalize sheds. I didn't run for office. Generals don't govern. They retire to their vineyards, or in my case, to their driveways. The next few months were the golden age of the Gilded Oaks. The fear evaporated. People left their bins out until 7 p.m. Someone painted their front door a slightly brighter shade of red than was previously allowed. The grass grew a little wilder. It felt like a neighborhood, not a prison camp. As for the Nova, I drove it. I drove it every single day for a month. It was terrible. Look, I love cars. But a 1978 Nova with a race-spec engine, no sound deadening, stiff suspension, and seats that was more suggestion than support is not a daily driver. It was hot. It was loud. It smelled like raw gasoline. Every time I went to the grocery store, I set off 3 car alarms in the parking lot. But I drove it. I drove it past Chad's house. He hadn't moved yet, but the for sale sign was up. I revved the engine every time I passed his driveway, just to rattle his windows. But the point had been made. One Saturday morning, about 3 months after the verdict, I was in the driveway. The Nova was there, basking in the sun. The rust was still there. I hadn't painted it. I never would. The rust was its war paint. Dave walked over. "You gonna paint it?" he asked. "Nope." "You gonna keep driving it?" I looked at the car. My back hurt from the suspension. My ears were ringing from the exhaust. "I think," I said slowly, "the restoration is complete." I walked to the garage. I pressed the button. The door rolled up. My wife's SUV was in there on the left. The right side was still my shop, but I had cleared a space. I had moved the table saw. I had consolidated the tool chests. I got in the Nova. I fired it up one last time. I eased it into the garage. It fit, barely. I shut the engine off. The silence was sudden and profound. I got out and hit the button. The garage door rolled down, sealing the beast in its tomb. "End of an era," Dave said, a little sadly. "The mission is accomplished," I said. "The driveway is reclaimable." We stood there looking at the empty concrete slab. It looked big, empty. "So, what now?" Dave asked. "You just gonna park your Honda there?" I looked at the Honda. It was a good car, reliable, boring. "Yeah," I said, "for now." But the itch was already there. The engineering brain never really turns off. The desire to tinker, to build, to annoy authority, it's a chronic condition. A week later, I was reading the bylaws again. Just for fun. Old habits die hard. I was skimming through the recreational vehicles section, which had been heavily revised by the new board to be more lenient, but still had some restrictions left over from the original developer charter that couldn't be easily changed without a county vote. Article 14, Section B, Marine Vessels. Boats and marine vessels may not be stored in driveways unless they are undergoing seaworthiness repairs that cannot be performed in water. Such repairs must be completed within a reasonable time frame. Reasonable time frame. That phrase again. The vagueness. The beautiful, exploitable vagueness. I looked at my driveway. It was empty. It was lonely. I pulled out my phone. I opened Craigslist. I didn't search for cars. I searched for boats. Specifically sailboats. Big ones. The kind with masts. I found it in an hour. A 22-foot Catalina sailboat. It had a cracked hull. The sails were missing. It was sitting in a field in Ocala, covered in moss. Free to good home, trailer included, tires flat. I texted Big Mike. "Mike, are you busy next weekend?" Mike replied instantly. "What did you find?" "A boat." "We don't live near the water, Jack." "The bylaws don't say I have to sail it," I typed back. "They just say I have to make it seaworthy." "Jack," Mike texted, "how tall is the mast?" 30 feet. That's higher than the roofline." "I know." "I'll bring the truck." I walked out to the driveway. I could see it already. The hull would take up the whole slab. The mast would tower over the neighborhood like a spire of defiance. I could hang a pirate flag from the top. I smiled. Patricia was gone, Chad was leaving. But there would always be another Chad. There would always be someone who thought they could tell a man what to do with his own concrete. And when they came, I would be ready. I'd be on the deck of my land-locked ship, sanding the hull 1 square inch at a time. I sipped my coffee. "Permission to come aboard," I whispered to no one. The restoration continues.